Thank you so much, Dr. Machila. I once again would like to appreciate the opportunity to be with all the attendees in the forum or in this platform. So this is a presentation, or this is an engagement. I think we will just have a discussion about methodologies in natural sciences together for the next hour or so. I think it will last that long. So hold on and don't go. We just engage. Please feel free to engage with me just as well as I touch on certain topics that might be of concern to you. So natural methodologies in natural sciences is the topic. So this concerns rather students that are in, I would say, life sciences or agriculture, consumer sciences, environmental sciences. That would cover the scope of natural sciences that UNISA is offering, or even the guys in nanoscience, but I'm not sure if they will get something from this session. But then I'm just trying to cover to just ensure that if you are listening and you are part of this session, the people that will that I'm aiming for are the people that are studying natural sciences, whose research problem quite often includes understanding, describing characteristics of a phenomenon. There are students that often try to manipulate the effects of something, of a particular phenomenon. So this is meant just for students that are particularly in natural sciences. Rather, if you're doing the hard sciences, it probably won't be so much compliant with your area of specialty or that area, because I particularly adapted it for the students that are in the natural sciences. Even in agriculture, I must add. So because I'm also a specialist just as well in agriculture. So this it will proceed. I have an overview here that says that we look at natural sciences as a discipline, the research methodologies in the context of natural sciences. Research, what is research, the meaning, objectives, and characteristics, the types of researches, the research structure components, the research procedures for the methodologies that are of concern. So I particularly included the part about research, meaning and objectives or characteristics, just so that we can have an understanding really that, rather I highlighted it because I believe it's important. It's a very critical part as you are doing your research, as we are trying to really conceptualize how we are going to go about executing your proposed plan. You have to have a good and firm understanding of the meaning, the objectives of your particular research. So I'm going to get into that whilst we are engaging. So natural sciences, what is natural sciences? I believe it is natural science is one of the branches of science concerned with describing, understanding, and predicting, or rather the prediction of natural phenomena based on empirical evidence from observation or experimentation. It is based on evidence. The natural science is based on evidence or phenomenon that occur naturally. So we are looking at things that are in nature. We're looking at things that are particularly in things that are occurring here on the planet Earth, trying to get a full grasp or an understanding of why and how they are occurring, and possible manipulations that could be that we could have. Natural science is quite diverse. It has a lot of branches and sub-branches. It includes physical science and life sciences. And just to illustrate that, people in biology, microbiology, cosmology, physics, chemistry, oceanography, agriculture, that is the targeted audience, rather, that is needed, or rather that I'm scoping with this session. So natural science as a discipline is essentially looking at trying to understand, trying to describe and understand things that are occurring in nature, and hence describing them as a phenomenon. If you are going to make some alteration or manipulate it in a particular way so that you can advantage or bring out rather the advantages of a particular phenomenon, and we can better enjoy and live our lives better when we are having these phenomena. I mean, when you have done your research, of course your research has advantages. Your research has things that we appreciate. Some people do their research to inform policy, to inform scientists, the science community, so that we can better enjoy our lives or our livelihoods, and we can benefit in many ways from your study. Now, to research. Research is a logical and systematic search for new and useful information on a particular topic. I'm sure everyone or all the students that are in the platform, they already have settled on a particular topic and they're now investigating it. And now the point is, how are you going to logically or systematically search for new and useful information on that particular topic that you have settled on? So that is what research is, and it comprises of redefining the problems, formulating hypotheses, or suggesting solutions, collecting, organizing, and evaluating data, making deductions from the data, reaching conclusions therefrom. And lastly, carefully testing the conclusions that you have determined to determine whether they fit the formulated hypothesis that has been put forward in the research. And now that is a description that is of what research is by Woods. The research of the objectives of doing research. In this, the major aim of any kind or any type of research is to find out the reality and the facts, which is unknown and has not been, or things that have not been exposed. So that is the major aim why people need to do research, or why we are enrolled in programs wherein we are involved in research. We want to mine or excavate or take from, we want to determine exactly what are the real, what is real, what are the facts on a particular phenomenon, so that we can be able to disclose that information and make presentations about them and really discuss and work it through. And all these things are so that we can be able to make them known. Its objectives, or particularly the research objective, it includes to test and verify facts, to analyze events or processes or phenomenon in order to identify the cause and effects of relationship. The objectives are also important. They also include that we need to develop tools. So when we engage in research, we develop tools so that they can be useful for the end users. We develop concepts, we could develop theories, we solve and understand scientific and non-scientific problems. Research is done, or research objectives are set up in order to be able to predict independent variables from a given set of independent variables. We can be able to determine dependent variables, what the responses are. So what responses, when you manipulate the independent variables, what could be the ultimate or the outcomes from a particular phenomenon that is under study. So what I have here, I decided to just bring in some objectives for us to have a look at. These objectives have been taken from varied master's degrees across our in the College of that looks at natural sciences. So I used these objectives. I brought out these objectives so that you can have a discussion or look at them, because I think they're important. If we look at like I highlighted earlier, that the subject of methodology, it's all based on the objectives, what you are going to achieve. When we are looking at methodologies, we are essentially looking at the how part of the study. The how section, or if I may put it bluntly like that, it's the how section, how you are going to execute your research, how you are going to execute your proposed idea if you are in the proposal stage. So now, if you can't reach the how section without fully having a grasp of what it is that you are going to execute, what it is that you're going to do. So for you to be able to fully have a comprehensive plan of how it is that you are going to perform your tasks in a particular research, you need to have these objectives set out so that you know exactly what you are going to do and what you're going to do with the results that you are going to get. So for dissertation one, that looked at environmental studies, by Aker, I'm not sure, in 2022. This is the MSc that was produced in our college, not CGS, but in the College of Environmental Studies, Environmental and Agricultural Sciences. So this dissertation had these 4 points as the objectives. So for number one, I think this author looked at determined rather the ecological state of the environment of two sites. Determined the objective of the study was to determine the current land use of the environment, to determine the community's attitude rather towards the environment, to determine the possible link between the ecological state, biodiversity, land use, and attitude. So this dissertation number one is describing the objectives. So one would expect that this person, now that the objectives are set out properly and in the way that in the numbered order, in the thesis that you are going to look, if you look at the next chapters, they need to feed information. They need to have exact methodologies. They need to answer the questions. The person is going to go out and collect data or information in order to fully answer the point. For instance, the point number one, that is to determine the ecological state of the environment. So there are methods that are there. There are procedures that are outlined so that one can determine the ecological state, what it means to determine the ecological state rather. For point number two, the current land use of the ecological state. So this person will also will use the right tools, need to use the right information in order to acquire the relevant data for this particular objective. So I want to now move on to the second thesis that concerned groundwater by Makomboti, 2023. This is yet another master's degree that had these as these 3 points. Or maybe I used these 3 because I just selected the 3. There are probably more than 3, but then these are the 3 that I needed to just so that we can be able to fit them in the slot for this brief session, because this student had even a whole lot more, so that I decided to just cut it short and use these 3 for the illustration purposes. So these 3 includes the following points. Number 1, collect and analyze groundwater samples to determine the presence of Cryptosporidium, Giardia species, and Escherichia coli. That is point number 1. Number 2, to analyze the physicochemical parameters such as pH, pH, electrical conductivity, nitrates as nitrogen free, and saline ammonia as nitrogen, phosphate as phosphorus, chloride as chlorine, and the total suspended solids. So these are some of the parameters that were going to be determined by this learner to analyze. Point number 3, to determine the potential health impacts of the microorganisms that are listed there on humans. So this person, or this author, investigated the groundwater in a particular site, or a couple of sites, I'm not sure. According to this objective, we're not sure how many sites were of interest. But then what we are getting is that the objectives were to collect information about groundwater, collect physiochemical parameters about groundwater just as well to determine the potential health. So now, moving from here, we would expect that the authors will use the right and correct appropriate methods in order to collect this data so that they can properly inform the study, so that we can be able to draw conclusions and make, or rather we can draw conclusions and make recommendations about the groundwater in that particular area. And then point number 3 is, or rather thesis number 3 is on economics by Mapale, that finished in 23 or submitted in 2022. So we have 3 objectives as well. Objective number 1, the authors examined the effects of real exchange rates on fruit exports in South Africa. Number 2, to establish the causal relationship between fruit exports and currency exchange rates. Number 3, to evaluate the existence of long-run equilibrium. So now I'm not in all these, I might not be an expert or familiar with this particular topic of study that is in economics. This one, the number 2, is concerning groundwater. The other one is concerning the environment just as well. I think the dissertations number 1 and 2 are more closely linked because they study the environment. So all in all, what we want to do here, I highlighted this. I'm spending time on the objectives because they are critical in informing the methodology that one is going to use. And what we are looking at is thesis and dissertations that are in natural sciences. So there is something that I'm building up to so that you can be able to understand the type of methodology that is relevant for students or for researchers that are in natural sciences. So now there are, in the next slide, or in this slide, we are having examples of objectives that are from theses that were submitted by even 3 students here. So with this one, I will not take more time, but I just want to highlight from thesis number 1, where thesis number 1, for the objective for thesis number 1, Minase 2013, the objective was to assess the effect of change in land management on carbon storage and the contribution of livestock to carbon storage. Number 2, to examine the impact of livestock on natural sciences and the environment. The objective number 3 is to recommend options for mitigation and adaptation of environmental changes. So I won't look at the other 2, which is the one that concerns food security, and 3, water quality, because all of them in all the thesis, I'm just trying to drive at one point, that objectives are so much important. They inform the reader as to what methodology, or rather the appropriate methodology that needs to be executed by the researcher. So if you look at objective number 1 for the thesis number 1, to assess the effect of change in land management on carbon storage. So the methods that are relevant to assessing that, to the assessing, they speak to the methodology, or rather, they should speak to this objective so that you can answer properly and adequately, and then test that hypothesis accordingly using the statistical applications that are relevant, so that you can be able to draw conclusion and indeed have an understanding how and make a good evaluation or assessment of whatever that has happened as a result of or the changes that have happened in the land and influencing the carbon storage. So objectives are very much critical and important in guiding us and influencing the methodology that is going to be that one needs to use. So from right up here or to this point, one might understand that when you are doing, if you are doing research and you are doing you are trying to have an approach as to what kind of methodology you are going to use. At this point, you might understand, or you might get that there's a lot of what we are seeing from these objectives, from what the objectives that we've gone through. There's a lot of measurement that is required. There's a lot of going out of and data collecting. The data is quantifiable, I would say. If I may just scroll back, the data from all these dissertations is quantifiable. One needs to be able to determine. If you look at the groundwater, for instance, the student that was involved in groundwater, they went out to collect samples, did some analysis, determined some microorganisms, quantified them. So it looks like, if you are going to be doing natural sciences, or you're going to be doing research in natural sciences, one is predisposed to quantitative methodology, an approach that involves quantitative analysis. By the way, if you are doing these studies, no one at any point comes up to tell you that, oh, by the way, what kind of study are you doing? Or rather, what kind of methodology are you going to use? Is it mixed method? Is it, no one comes to tell you these things. They just you by default, by being in this particular college, by adopting or settling with this particular topic, by some predisposition, you default in the category that looks at quantitative methodologies, rather than you don't have to sit up and really decide and make a hard decision whether we are going to go this way or this way. No, what happens is, by virtue of being in a particular discipline, it's default that you use a particular approach. So this is just to say that, or to reiterate that, no one really comes up to you and to tell you that, okay, this is the kind of approach that you're going to use. But then you are guided, you are advised by your supervisors, you are advised even from your own learnings and studies. You will see, or the references that you go through, you will get to see and appreciate that this in application is quantitative methodology, the approach that is being used. So in essence, what we are trying to get you to understand is, when you are approaching your research, you are not going to necessarily sit up and give and be told that this is the kind of research, but then you need to be able to justify it just as well as you are writing it up. So I'll give you an examples of what that means. We'll look at that. Hopefully we have a bit of some time and go through some the theses that I've selected so that you can use them. I think it's one of these 6 that we've seen. So now let's look at the characteristics of scientific research. So, of course, I believe that this will also, or this information feeds into the methodologies that are adopted in a particular research. We must understand that some of the characteristics of scientific research, they include purposive, or rather they've got purpose. The research should have a definitive aim or purpose. That is so that it becomes a scientific approach, a scientific research. The research needs to be rigorous, which indicates carefulness and a degree of exactitude in the research. This is achieved through a good theoretical base and sound methodological design. The research needs to have high replicability, meaning that the results of the test of hypothesis should be the same given the type of research and circumstances, given that the type of research and circumstances are similar. So you need to be able to get or obtain the same results. If other authors or if other researchers embark on a journey to study and do the same thing as you are doing, they should be able to attain similar results or close to matching the results as you have. Scientific research needs to have high precision. This talks to theoretical concepts, the fact that theoretical concepts must be defined with great precision so that others can also be able to use them and appreciate those definitions in order to measure the concepts and test the theories that you talk about in your write-up. Falsifiability, a theory or hypothesis must be stated in a way that can be disproven. I'm sure you know H0 or the null hypothesis. Parsimony, scientists must be able or must always strive to accept the simplest, logical, most economical explanation in a particular, when studying a particular phenomenon. Now we get into the type of researches that we have. The types of research, they may be classified according to the purpose and function that is concerned. So there is explanatory research. Explanatory research is often conducted in new areas of inquiry, where the goals of the research are to scope extent of a particular phenomenon, problem, or behavior. Also, to generate some initial ideas about a particular phenomenon. If, for instance, you are investigating, I think I was thinking of the area of climate change and its impact. So we're still studying the impacts of climate change. Already, we are even now trying to minimize or curtail the impacts of climate change in various ways. But then, if we are doing exploratory studies, it means that we are still trying to acquire information about climate change. So I'm using climate change as an illustration, all right? So if we are doing, we are studying climate change as an exploratory, under exploratory research, the aim therein would be to determine or to generate information that can be applicable in, that would be useful in future. All right. Now, exploratory research also has this goal to test the feasibility of undertaking more extensive studies regarding a particular or any particular phenomenon. And there's, again, descriptive research. It is a research method that describes the characteristics of the population or phenomenon that is under study, that is being studied. In this particular type of research, you describe or explain and validate the research findings. Descriptive research also, it can answer the how, the what, the when, and the how questions, but not the why. So you are basically describing the attributes of a particular phenomenon, but you don't necessarily go into the questions as to why this is happening, because you are just being descriptive. You're trying to describe the outlook, the general overview of a particular phenomenon. The researcher does not control or manipulate any of the variables, but only observes and measures them. That's basically what the researcher will do. The researcher or the descriptive research is usually defined as a type of quantitative research. It's a type of quantitative research. Qualitative research can also be used for descriptive purposes just as well. Then the other type, or the third type of research, is explanatory research. It is conducted for a problem that was not well established or was not well researched before. It demands priorities, generates operational definitions, and provides a better research model. So it's basically trying to explain. It's intended to explain rather than to describe, as the other, it's the second type of research that was explained previously. It's just to explain I think I would say here it's the why part. The main aim of the explanatory research is to identify any causal links between the factors or variables that pertain to the research problem. Such research is also very structured in nature, so it follows a particular protocols in order to be able to get to, so that you can be able to fully explore, to be able to give explanations. There are written down procedures and protocols in order to satisfy the requirements for it being an explanatory research. Research approaches or methodologies. So now we are trying to get to the crux of the matter, the approaches that are relevant to natural science. So this encompasses the study of methods or the instruments necessary for elaboration of scientific work, that is the research approaches or research methodologies. So there are essentially three research methodologies. One is qualitative research. The keywords are reporting, in quotes, narrative or narrative research. The keywords are discovering, exploring, describing of phenomenon, seeking to understand, as well as questions are often the start of how, and one asks broad questions, open-ended questions, so that they can be able to really get answers to fulfill a particular research question that is under study. It aims to produce in-depth and illustrative information in order to understand the various dimensions of the problem under analysis. So you must be able to produce in-depth through trying to explore, describe, trying to understand, give questions, giving those open-ended questions. So point number 3 is that it is concerned with aspects of reality that cannot be quantified, focusing on the understanding and explanation of the dynamics of social relations. Qualitative research works well with the universe of meanings, motivations, or rather motives, aspirations, beliefs, values, attitudes. I think I mentioned the attitudes previously in one of the theses that we went through as an objective, to get attitudes of a particular community when it comes to the environment and stuff like that. So all these are done, and it works well, and it corresponds to a deeper sense or deeper space of relationships, processes, and phenomena that cannot be reduced to operationalization of variables. So you can't talk about variables that that refer to quantities. It can't be quantifiable. So we're looking here at the motives. We're trying to understand the reasons and beliefs why a certain phenomenon is taking place. This particular type of research is then relevant to that particular study. If we are going to be doing qualitative research, we're basically not looking at figures or numbers of any sort. That gives rise to the next one, which is quantitative research. This one, it tests the objectives or theories by examining an independent variable to see its impact on the dependent variables. So now it involves a bit of manipulation there. So if you're going to change something in order to observe a particular, if you're going to attenuate or increase a particular variable, what happens? Have an increase in a particular variable, what happens in other variables that might be related in that particular phenomenon? There is the use of the words effect, impact, relate, compare, best, better in those particular research. So if you're looking at studies that determine the effects, studies that look at the impact of a particular phenomenon, you are most likely looking at quantitative research. The research also has, or it tests hypotheses. It asks specific questions. There is no ambiguity about the concepts being measured. So it entails a bit of measurement. And if you're going to go out and determine, for instance, a growth rate of cattle when you are feeding them a particular diet, that should speak to you, that informs you that this type of research is quantitative research. Sampling is usually random. So that is usually random, but then there are cases where you use other sampling procedures or sampling methods. We look at sampling methods just as well. The study of the potentialities and weaknesses of the various research methodologies has been of interest to several researchers, and this has given rise to a third research method, or rather a third research methodology. What we looked at qualitative research and quantitative research. So now we are looking at the third one, which is quantitative, is a mixed method type of research. It is a combination of at least one quantitative or qualitative and one quantitative research component. So this one will have a fair mix of both research methodologies that I've just explained now, the qualitative and quantitative, combining attributes of these two. And then this is not just done after you've collected data and then you think, okay, what am I going to do with this set data set? Let me just put it under you. These things need to be done way before, while in the conceptualization, that this is what's going to be relevant. You apply quantitative research in this component. You are going to apply qualitative research in that other particular section of your research work, and then endorse it in your proposal, and it all goes and gets approved. You don't get to sit and think of these things after you've collected data and then you come up with all these reasons. That wouldn't be doing things in the right or proper way as a researcher. Now, quantitative research in natural sciences, it adopts structured procedures and formal instruments for data collection. This is to say that in natural sciences, quite predominantly, we are going to be using, or you as a researcher, you will use quantitative research or quantitative methodologies in your research. The results may be inferable because what we do is we do a lot of sampling in this particular type of research. When you are measuring data from a population, you can't really measure the whole population. You don't, unless of course you have access to the whole population and you have the means to measure the whole population, but quite often we sample. so that we can be able to determine and make inferences about us from our samples about the entire population. It uses clearly defined and focused and measurable objectives. That is quantitative research. The objectives, I've tried to spend some time to go over the objectives. They need to be measurable. They need to be clear. They need to be focused. That in this particular research, for instance, I'm going to go out and measure feed efficiency. In this particular research, I'm going to go out and measure tannin content, for instance. That is just precise. That okay, I need to measure tannin, or I'm going to determine the phenolic content of a particular forage or particular tree. Even if you're measuring, if you're looking at there are trees of their own interest, a particular species of tree. If the leaves, you harvest the leaves and measure the phenolic content. It's very much definitive. It's very much focused that you are determining the effect, or you are determining phenolic content in this particular forage. Then you are going to apply the appropriate procedures and protocols whilst executing that task. That will be feeding back to your main objectives. And you understand that when you arrive, the objectives, you get to arrive to your objectives because it is something that you've motivated for. It's something that you have described, that you have given, you've talked about even in your literature review, you've discussed it. I'm talking about the objectives. It's something that you have talked about. So when you're now executing, trying to determine your objectives, or you're executing your objectives in your research, you are getting to the part that is the methodological section. All of which, all of that you are trying to measure, get them to be measurable, get them to be focused. So you are trying to get to cut down your research into steps, sequential steps that eventually feed into the bigger picture of your research. It has great replicability. So in this procedure, we have a lot of protocols, we have a lot of systems in place that, okay, if you are going to, for instance, I was talking about measuring phenolic contents, you know exactly, or rather it's stated down as some protocols somewhere that these are the protocols for determining phenolic content of a particular forage. And then as we are doing that, other people should be able to follow those steps and also attain similar results just as well. The disadvantages of this particular type of research is that the data may not be used to explain the why question, why a particular phenomenon thinks, feels, or acts in a particular way. So that is where qualitative research comes in. Two, it's a bit of time consuming because it requires that there be sampling that should be done. Data needs to be collected from that particular sample if you're going to do samples, and then there's analysis that needs to be done just as well. Now let's look at quantitative research methods, or rather types of quantitative research that we're looking at four. There's descriptive. I think we've talked about descriptive research prior when we're talking about types of research. Now, under quantitative research as well, we have descriptive research that describes the characteristics of a particular population or phenomenon. We looked at, now there is also correlation. There is experimental, there is quasi-experimental research. So I won't explain those because I'm running a bit behind time. The procedures in this kind of in the research, what we do after addressing the research proposal by having a topic, literature review, problem statement, research question, and objectives, one has to be able to then have a research approach, have a research design, research methodology, data collection process, and data analysis. So these are some of the main steps one needs to be aware of as you approach your research. If you are in your proposal stage, you'll be working out the proposal and writing out why, giving the justifications for your project, why you need to do it, why is it important. After having done all those steps, you get into this section wherein now you have to execute what you are proposing. And these, what we are saying in this slide is that these are some of the things that you need to understand: the approach, design, method, data collection, and data analysis. The research design. The research design is a framework or method or structure of the study chosen for data collection and analysis. It justifies the logic, structure, and principles of the chosen methodology and the methods, and explains how these relate to the research question. The function of a research design is to ensure that the evidence obtained enables the researcher to answer the initial question as unambiguously as possible. So typical research designs in quantitative research include deductive reasoning. What we're talking about, one has to form, excuse me, a hypothesis, or hypothesis in plural, not just one. Excuse me. There'll be collection of data, the deduction of reasoning by collecting data and in an investigation of the problem. So you collect the data and use that for deductive reasoning. There's also analysis of the data to prove the hypothesis, or one hypothesis in the case of Swan. I'm saying that because there's a difference in the spellings. False or not false. Now, research methods. A research method is a technique for collecting data, which might include questionnaires. You need to decide on that, which approach or how are you going to collect your data? Are you going to use research questionnaires, interviews, with participant observations, focus groups, surveys, observations, interpretation of documents, experiments, secondary data, internet search, research methods. Methods they have various procedures, or they have various procedures, schemes, and systems that are used. They basically are various procedures and schemes that are used in research. Data collection in research. For data collection processes data collection processes have three approaches. I've mentioned observational methods, interview, and experimental in the previous slide. So the data collection involves these, under this kind of research methodology. It involves observations, it involves interviews, it involves also experiment that can be executed in order to examine effects of a particular phenomenon. And we'll look at, as the last part of our talk, we'll look at sampling methods. With sampling methods, we have probability and non-probability sampling methods. For one, you have random sampling, where you just put all possible, or rather, all possible samples of a given size have the same probability of being selected and being used as part of your study. All of them. So you just put all, you label all the individuals of the particular population, give them numbers, throw all of them in a hat and select at random, and then take the number that you decide and select each one of them, and to fulfill whatever population size that you have determined, then you'll have your selected sample as a random. I hope I explained it as simple as possible. So there's also stratified random sampling. In this method, a large population is divided into groups The groups are called strata or strata. And members of a sample are chosen randomly from these strata. There is no requirements to select. There's no requirement to select all the strata, the individuals from all the strata, but you just select a few within the population. The strata are of interest. If you're having a particular population and you realize that the population is not homogeneous, it can be divided into particular sections. For instance, you're having animals in a kraal, you realize that they have different age groups that could immediately form strata for you, and then you select the number of animals in a particular in that particular population from the different age groups. If you have, for instance, cattle in a kraal that are aged, of different age groups, age 1 to 2 to 3, different ages 1, 2, and 3. So you select maybe 2 from each age and you use those as your sample for analysis. That is a simple analogy of stratified random sampling. With cluster sampling, a population is divided into something called clusters. Usually it's because of geographic reasons or demographic segmentation. A cluster is similar to a stratum in a particular way. I'm not sure why I even indicated that it's similar, because it's not necessarily similar. However, the sampling procedures or the sampling process is different. Procedure. All right. So what happens in this one? I could use, when you have to describe a cluster. If you realize that your population is mixed, or rather is divided, the example we have is geography. Or if perhaps I can go back to my example of cattle in a kraal. So if you realize that you go to a particular village, you realize that you are investigating cattle, or you're investigating animals belonging to farmers. For instance, if you're investigating animals, let's go with that. If you're investigating animals belonging to farmers, each farmer will have cattle, goats, sheep, and chickens, or those 4 species. If you are interested in how or what different attributes of those, if you are interested in maybe feeding, the amount of feed that is consumed that the farmer needs to procure for their livestock in that particular village, all those animals eat food, but then I know that the food is different. For instance, so what we're talking about is, in that example of farmers in a particular village, they have animals that are of 4 different species. That already can be set up as a cluster, wherein you go to a particular farmer in this village. Each farmer will have cattle, cattle, goat, sheep, and chicken. So you're going to take the number of, in fact, you're going to take that whole, you're going to sample those animals, take those as a cluster. So the question is, what is random in that case? What is random is you're going to select a farmer. You're going to determine how many farmers you're having in that village, and then select those farmers according to your sample size. When you go to those farmers, you know already that they have all 4 different species. So for your analysis, I wish I could have a better diagram to explain this, but then I'll have a slide that will show the differences between these sampling methods in a few after this one. systematic sampling. Systematic sampling, it involves sampling units that are selected at intervals. So with this one, it's good because I have a diagram showing there. You have animals that are in a crawl. When you look, you're going to select, you put all the animals in a crawl, or then what you do is you select, you have an interval. Every 2 animals that come out, or every 3 or every third animals that come out, that comes out of the crushing pan, or whatever that is, you take it as a sample, as to be part of your sample, and then you use those those samples for examination. So if you probably have as much as 100 cows in a crawl, you put all of them here, and then every 5th animal that comes out, you take it to be part of your sample up until you have a sample size of 20, for instance. So now the challenge would be which number is the starting point as they are coming out. There you can also apply random sampling. Within the first 5 units, you have to determine which one can be your starting point. So you randomly pick, you randomly assign the starting point within a number that is within the interval, the number of within the interval that you are having. If the interval, for instance, is 5, so the starting point should be within the first 5 animals that are coming out of there, and that should be applied at random. Then you select then that's how you get you achieve your systematic random sampling. So these 4 are pretty much described in this slide, where you have simple random sampling. You have a whole pool, and then you select at random. You have stratified random sample. The animals or people, in this case, people are put in groups. There's something that causes them to be different, and then maybe it's their gender, I don't know. But then whatever attributes that you found to be causing differences in your population, then you put them according to the different groups, and then you select at random within this group as well as within the other group. I think I've described systematic random sampling. In this one, you select you determine what the interval is. You put the people coming out or people in rows, and take it every 4th. In this case, it's the interval is 1, 2, 3, or every 3rd person that is in a row will be selected for that population. Cluster sampling, again, the individuals are put in. They already have attributes that makes them to be unique. So you determined with the example I had of farmers, all these individuals, this group of these 3 individuals will belong to one group, will be one cluster, and this one will be also one cluster. This one will also be one cluster, and as well as the other one. So what is at random is you choose a cluster at random. You determine which cluster you're going to go for, and all the individuals in that cluster are measured because they represent the rest of the population. So other non-probability sampling methods, we look at convenience sampling, where the researcher basically uses people that are closest to them, or the samples as samples. The researcher will use the individuals that are closer to them to determine, or to use them as part of their research. There's purposive sample. There's a particular reason why the individuals are selected to be part of the experiment or the trial. So then they have to fulfill certain requirements, then they are selected. So you do not use any random sampling approach here. You just have a particular reason. Maybe they are females, then you go for the females, or maybe they possess particular traits, then they are useful in the study. The third one is a snowballing sample, wherein the researcher follows the referrals. If the researcher gets information from a farmer that there are 3 other farmers that could give him data or data for his or her experiments, that the researcher goes to the 3. And once again, should those ones refer them to others, they continue as such, all until the researcher reaches a point of saturation, or where they have enough samples to be able to work with. So that talks to then the sample size. Sample size also is another topic on its own, as to how big a sample do you need or require for your research. But then this is basically just to show you that there's non-sampling methods that are also done in quantitative methodologies that are done in natural sciences. Then we look at data analysis. I think this is the last slide. When you look at data analysis, we're looking at statistical packages that are involved. So for quantitative data, we apply a lot. There are a lot of statistical approaches or statistical packages that are available that are useful when you are analyzing your data. And UNISA does host workshops on certain statistical packages that might be useful for conducting statistical analysis. But then what's important is that statistical analysis fall under this type, fall under this section where you should be able. And my one thing I can also advise is that the rationale or the reasons why they are used in your particular research, they are very, very important. So it's important that you justify and give reasons for selecting some of those the statistical approach, statistical softwares that you use, and even statistical approaches just as well, because there are a lot of tests that need to be done that are I can't even mention or begin to mention, because you have ANOVAs and analysis of covariance, you have principal components analysis. There's a lot of statistical approaches that are available. However, it's important that you give meaning and reasons why you selected either or any one of those. It is a process of cleaning and transforming and modeling data to discover useful information for discussion, supporting decision-making, and making conclusions. The data analysis is done because it's a process of systematically applying statistical or logical techniques to illustrate, describe, condense, and evaluate data. That's how I put it. And then also, data analysis is a process that relies on the methods, techniques that were used to collect the raw data. So this one really needs raw data. You need to feed raw data to the system so that you can be able to analyze. If you didn't analyze the data, you just collected the data and you didn't analyze the data, it's not so much advisable. You need to be able to analyze the data using particular procedures. Otherwise, it's all chance. Especially when if you did sampling of your data, you need to have a lot of ironing out of the data. Data analysis assists the researcher in mining for insights that are relevant to the questions or objectives or the aims of the project. So that is why data analysis is done, and it involves statistical packages, it involves statistical analysis, modeling, and all the sort. So these things are done in order to fulfill that, to fully answer the research questions. So what we're doing, or what we covered now, is just to fully understand that when you are approaching your research, this is the research methodology of concern, which is quantitative research, which is quite predominant in the studies of natural sciences. So in conclusion, the methodologies in natural sciences, or in natural science, most often it will involve quantitative approach. Students need to be able to give clear and be able to justify to the readers or reviewers the work, or why they adopted the different or the particular research that they did in their studies. So before I get to that last thank you slide, I wanted really to show examples of the methodologies in play. So earlier on, I cited that there were theses that I used as objectives. So some of the objectives or some of the methodologies that they used for their analysis involved things like these. Where you have in chapter 6, you have the methodology of that was used by the student, and we have it here that the student compared two study sites according to the level of land use. So this was in this study involved environmental studies, I'll put it like that, where in two study sites were compared the attitudes of the residents towards the environment and the perspective of the respective ecological state of the sorry, I'm not reading right. The attitudes of the residents towards the environment and the respective ecological state of the environment was assessed and was compared. So in this study, what was used essentially is a quantitative approach, wherein was qualitative approach, while a qualitative data collection approach was applied to assess the ecological state. So I think there's a bit of an error here in the write-up, because we see that the student applied a qualitative approach, and a quantitative collection of data or qualitative data approach was applied. So this one, I believe, is supposed to be quantitative. So it's a mix of both methods. So you can have a look at this case study. I think I added it as a reference in the presentation. So if it's not there, you will have it. You will have the slides and look it up there. So those are some of the things I wanted to highlight. And as a conclusion, also as a parting shot from my side, is just that your approach to natural sciences or in your studies, have it in mind that what you're going to do, you will be collecting data, you'll be involved in analyzing facts, or rather not facts, you'll be involved in analyzing values and quantifying things. So in a nutshell, what you'll be doing, you'll be applying quantitative methodologies. So having said that, I would like to entertain the questions that might be there on the platform.